In this video, I'm going to be discussing predictability and how it relates to processes that set people up for failure. Sometimes it can feel like you're chasing a moving target. You can't predict where your target is or where it's going to be, so you have no idea if your efforts are on the mark or not. You know, it's not usually intentional maliciousness that is the reason that employees are set up to fail. It's usually a systemic issue. Organizations that are trying to achieve a wide range of incompatible goals often establish processes that are counterproductive. So employees end up working at cross purposes with each other. However, when it's clear what an organization has decided to be bad at, and everyone is on the same page about that, and everyone's comfortable with that, and everyone acknowledges that, then employees are usually freed from chasing too many goals that they can never achieve. So how is predictability, though? How is that related to being set up for failure? Well, we have to keep in mind that predictability for almost all human beings in all kinds of situations. People prefer predictability almost above absolutely everything else. People will forego high quality things and they'll trade those off. They will freely give it up in order to have predictability instead. So instead of having sometimes a high quality thing and sometimes it's a mediocre and sometimes it's low quality, people want the predictability instead of sometimes getting a high quality and sometimes getting a low quality and sometimes getting a mediocre thing. They want predictability. So in order to get that predictability, they're perfectly willing to forgo having the high quality one sometimes and just have the mediocre all the time. So how does this play out in the arena of service excellence? Well, when the expectations of customers can be manipulated in a particular way, then they can be met. So if you're told that the wait for a table at a restaurant is going to be 25 minutes and you actually get your table in 15 minutes, you're comparing your expectation for the 25 minutes, which they were manipulating you by telling you that because they always knew it wasn't going to be 25 minutes. So then when you do the comparison, you think that you've got a bonus because it didn't actually take the 25 minutes. But really, that's just a very simplistic manipulation scheme that happens in a lot of service interactions. And people, quote, fall for that all the time, right? The waits in an amusement park line, all kinds of things. That same phenomena of setting up the expectations in a manipulative way plays out. So how does your workplace, I want you to think about this, how does your workplace manipulate the expectations of your customers? And how does that concept of predictability play out for your customers? Now I want you to consider that our needs as human beings for predictability, our desire for predictability doesn't change when sometimes we're in the role of a customer and sometimes we're in the role of the employee. We don't automatically change. We still have that desire for that predictability. So how is that helping or hindering in your workplace? Is it being used to set people up for success or for failure? Consider how you might be collecting and analyzing data in your workplace. Let's say there's a decision that your unit needs to make and everyone's input is needed. Frequently, the individual data points we collect give us a picture that looks something like this. We prefer that our data reveal some kind of certainty. But most of the time, our data are not conclusive. Our data look like this. It looks just like some kind of random, unorganized, scattered collection. So what humans frequently do without even realizing it is we force a frame of certainty or predictability on top of this inconclusive data. And we often choose a very simplistic frame. This one. This is the good versus bad frame. And when we use this frame, we're trying to justify whichever endpoint we've chosen, either the good side or the bad side, and we're trying to force the data to fit our need for predictability, when really the data are ambiguous. So if we're not using our critical thinking skills to deal with this ambiguity, if we're fearful of that ambiguity, we can find ourselves using overly simplistic frames like this that certainly are not helpful. So using critical analysis helps us realize that simplistic frames like the good versus bad one are not helpful. So we need to actively resist that urge to use those simplistic frames. So what do we do with our data points then? Well, we can use our critical analysis to examine the individual data points and begin to recognize patterns. There are often patterns there that we don't see because we were looking at the data points and trying to decide if they tipped toward the good side or the bad side. Or we were trying to see these like a simple dot-to-dot picture. So we thought their location was the only thing to pay attention to about them. But when we overlay them, we can adjust our viewpoint so that we're open to seeing patterns that are there. And this is where our desire for predictability, if we apply it this way, it can actually help us. Our desire for predictability helps us recognize even complex patterns like fractals. And fractals, I'm bringing up fractals here because it's the same kind of phenomena that are the patterns of behaviors in organizations that set people up for either success or for failure are a lot like fractal patterns. And in order to be able to see the pattern, you need to move in really closely, then you need to zoom out far enough, and you need to keep adjusting your focal point in close and then back out again till you can start to see the patterns of repeating behaviors that are dominant in an organization. You can then recognize these dominant norms in the organization. And those norms, those dominant patterns of behavior, those are what maintain the culture of an organization. For example, if throwing people under the bus is something that's common in a particular organization at all levels and in all forms, from the senior executive suite to the ways that customers are devalued at the point of customer interaction, you've uncovered a fractal pattern of behavior that is setting everyone up in the organization for failure. So you can see how you can harness your basic human need for predictability to help you recognize these patterns. And when we don't acknowledge this really basic need of ours, we can, inadvertently use overly simplistic models like that good and bad one just because of our fear of the ambiguity of complexity.